It's Steam Next Fest, Summer 24, and that means Simon's playing lots and lots of demos. I've got several videos on different genres coming through. This is the rhythm action one, obviously. And for this video, I've ordered the titles from games I was most surprised, excited and delighted by, and the games I'll be buying, through to the ones that I was least interested in by the time I'd finished the demo. I'm kicking off with Boyce the Voice because this was the biggest surprise and an absolute delight to play. It's not a rhythm action game where you're singing or playing an instrument. Boyce is the average white man who gets accidentally sucked into doing voiced overs for commercials. And so as you press the different buttons, you're just voicing over nondescript white man dialogue over radio adverts or TV indents and commercials and things like that. It's really comedically done, and I really enjoyed the humour and the cartoon graphics and the way how it felt scrappy in a early 2000 internet era cartoon where you could kind of get away with bloody murder and it would be fine. And so it's got cult classic written all over it. But crucially, the rhythm action element totally holds up too. You've got two note lanes that you flip between using the bumper buttons on your controller, and then you use the directional buttons and face buttons to trigger the different words that Boyce is talking about as you go through the commercials. They're really well done. The demo was great. I've replayed it several times. I was really also quite chuffed that you could switch between Xbox, PlayStation and keyboard like things on the screen. Total thumbs up, day one buy, sleeper hit. I cannot wait for this to be released. The next game on this list, which I absolutely adored and will be buying on day one, is ODDADA. It's more of a musical toy than it is a strict rhythm action game, but it was so creative and tactile and immersive, and it let you play in a no-fail state that I just think it's an absolute joyous experience to be part of. In ODDADA, you have several different musical toys or contraptions or interactive things that you can then twist cranks on or press buttons on or drop blocks in that then triggers sounds on a loop that goes round and round and round. And then once you're happy with what you've done on one toy, you can then change the different overarching effects. So day might be a full bright sound, afternoon might be something more reverby, nighttime and dusk is kind of putting things down into like brushed percussion instead of like full-on drum hits, or it might just be clonks like a MIDI keyboard. And then you add that to your choo-choo train, and then that goes on to the next toy. And then you build up several loops over time. And then at the end, you can trigger them on or off for a recording that goes onto a cassette that you can then customize the look and feel of a name, and it goes into your cassette box. It is so utterly charming, really playful. I just was lost in the just the fun of exploring and not feeling constrained, because it's up to you what you want to do and how you want to do it. So really good fun, great exploration tool, huge thumbs up from me. Next on this list, also a day one for me, will be KALPA Cosmic Symphony. This game is the most traditional rhythm action game that I've got on this list. It's a 4 or 5 button rhythm action game. You can switch between the two, and each song has 3 or 4 difficulty levels ranked between 1 and 20. I found the harder difficulties were really like, and I couldn't finish some of those songs, but I was having great fun trying because the soundtrack is so bombastic and full of life. It merges together Vocaloid elements with piano, club music that you'd sometimes, or piano electronica I would probably say, that you'd find in the Demo series, for example, with full-on like Chinese inspired classical music that's been like glitch chord to death. So it was just really in your face, and the beat maps match the music beautifully. There's also a full-on story mode in this as well, so yeah, plenty to enjoy. Really meaty demo as well. Spent a lot of time with this. 2 huge thumbs up. Perfect rhythm action game, and definitely one I'll be picking up on day one. Next up is a real switch of gears, and it's called Beats of Betrayal, and fans of games like Crypt of the Necrodancer will probably feel quite at home here. This is a dungeon crawler game, but it's entirely rhythm action based for when you can defend, attack, spark magic attacks and all of that kind of stuff. So at the bottom of the screen you'll be seeing a beat map, but you can't trigger all of your different attacks at different things because some are done with kick drums, some are done with snares, some are done with cymbal hits, some are more synthy based. And so as the world moves around you and you move around it in totally non-rhythmic fashion, all of your attacks are rhythm based. It was just really well done, and the demo, again quite substantial, spent quite a bit of time in there, showed you some of the early tutorial bits but then showed you some bits further in the game where it's really full on, and that had me really thinking about positioning on the screen versus when my next attack would be due for like an area of effect damage. And what was interesting is that different enemies can only be hurt by different instruments, so you're constantly switching on the fly to know what type of instruments you want to trigger as you go around doing things. Superbly put together, infinitely playable. Big thumbs up from me on this one. Keeping with that violent theme is Disco Samurai, and I quite enjoyed this one as well, but not quite as much of Beats of Betrayal. In this game you are playing as a samurai, although you do have a gun, which slightly confused me, and you're busy taking out various different other enemies as you try to rescue someone I believe is kidnapped at the beginning of the demo. The idea behind this is that each enemy will try and attack you on the beat of the music, and you have to constantly block and defend it. And then as they get worn down, you then attack them after you've blocked their fourth attack because they're knackered/stunned. So you have to keep watching out who's going to attack you when, so that you know when's the right time to attack, because not everyone attacks all the time. But you're having to keep a visual cue out for which enemy is going to go next, so that you know that you definitely have to block, because if you attack when someone attacks you, they always win. And so it's about attacking on the beat. Sometimes enemies will attack off the beat, and depending on which enemy is attacking you, they might go every beat of the bar, they might try and do every 2 beats of the bar, they might try and do every half beat. And it gets introduced as you go along and it becomes more complicated. So it felt very rhythmic and I really enjoyed that. The only thing I would say about this is that sometimes it gets a little bit, not convoluted, but it's more of a making sure that you visually keep on cue for what's going on all the way around you, because enemies might not be next to you, but they'll be gearing up an attack. So you just have to kind of have like cross-eyed moments occasionally. But it was still incredibly fun and enjoyable, and I'll definitely be picking it up. Next up is One Button Bosses, and I debated whether this should go in the arcade action rather than the rhythm action list, but because the bosses are very rhythmic, I've kept it here. This is a boss battler game where you don't necessarily attack, but you need to avoid all of the boss's attacks that come towards you, and they're usually quite rhythmic, which is why it made sense to keep it here. Each boss has its own arena shape, and you circle around the perimeter, chipping away damage automatically without much thought. The longer that you stay going in one direction, the faster your attacks will become, but because every time you press a button you switch direction and then you start off slow and build up momentum, you need to work out how well you can keep going in the same direction, dodging attacks, and then choosing the exact moment to then switch direction. And quite often that's rhythmic and emulating a beat or a melody of sorts, but it's entirely up to you whether you're strictly sticking with it. I found this game charming and really engrossing. Great fun. I'll be picking this one up on release as well. The next game on this list is Songs of Death, and it was one of the more unique games I've come across in Steam Next Fest, but I found it quite intriguing. It's also got hardly any English in it at the moment, where it's only been part translated, so I could be getting the mechanics of this game totally wrong. It's a hybrid of an idle clicker battler, a Survivor-esque style game, thinking that it's a breakout game, and a rhythm action game. Oh yes, what a combo. You pick a character that goes across the bottom of the screen, and underneath that character you'll see there's different items that you can equip as weapons, and you'll do that as you kill various enemies, earning XP and levelling up. The character constantly walks forward like an idle game, but you need to rhythmically trigger an attack as enemies come towards you and get in a hit zone. That felt very much like a Muse Dash style game from a rhythm action perspective, but there's only really one lane to think about. What's really interesting though is the top half of the screen acts almost like a aggressive version of Breakout or a Vampire Survivor-esque game, because all the enemies that are going to attack you that you have to think about rhythmically are coming from the top of the screen down in lanes. And whenever you have these different attacks and weapons that you've got down at the bottom of the screen, they auto trigger at the same time, like a Vampire Survivors game. So they're busy shooting their weapons or magic up the screen, chipping away and killing and damaging all of those enemies before they become real ones that you're then going to have to manually tackle as a rhythm action game. It's really weird to wrap your head around, but the more things you kill, either as they come down the screen from the automatically triggered rotating enemies, or the ones that you trigger manually and kill from the rhythm action element, all earn XP, which then triggers a RNG of what type of weapons you get to pick and choose from. That might upgrade what you've currently got in your arsenal to make you stronger, and then various bosses come in. There's a lot going on here. It doesn't all quite feel well balanced yet, but there's definitely something here that feels unique and interesting and really stilted in a way that had me super intrigued. And I did spend quite a bit of time with this demo just seeing where it progressed, and it was just more of the same but just more chaotic. So I did enjoy this and have kept it on my wish list and will be picking it up, so thumbs up. The next game on this list is Afterlove EP. And I was slightly disappointed with this one. And the reason why is because it looks absolutely gorgeous. It's got a heartfelt story of your childhood friend. You're in a teen band, but your girlfriend, or I'm assuming it's girlfriend from the demo, has passed away. And so you're kind of talking to her in your mind's eye. And she's trying to help you get your band back together so that you can kind of move on with your life. And so that perspective, the visual design, the actual story, all of that felt really great. What didn't feel great was the actual rhythm action element of it. When you play a guitar, you've got these two lines coming towards you and you just have to kind of press and hold and release on different directions to go up, down, left or right. And it might just be because it's early in the game and there's not many more mechanics being added in, but it didn't feel intuitive. It didn't really match up too well with the music that's being played, and it just felt too easy and simplistic. And I imagine it's probably going down that route because this is as much a story game as it is a rhythm action game, but the rhythm element felt really unsatisfying, particularly as it's a rock band. So I was expecting something to be a bit more dynamic rather than just press and hold and release for like a whole line of a guitar song. So yeah, I was a bit meh with that. I was still intrigued from the story elements, so it's staying on my wish list. Probably not a day one though. The next game on this list is EternAlgoRhythm. And it looks like a traditional rhythm action game. You've got lanes, you've got notes going up it and so on and so forth. But this has a really interesting twist in that it's a very short song constantly going round on a loop across 10 keyboard buttons. So the entire top row of your QWERTY keyboard is playable. And so as the notes go along, it judges you constantly and it just eternally loops round and it never seemed to end. And then I was looking at the goals and things that it's expecting you to do, and it's like, achieve 98% success rate of over 30 minutes. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. So it wants you to almost become hypnotic, like a rhythmic typing simulator. But the music wasn't really good enough and strong enough to support that. It's very harsh early MIDI, and so it was quite harsh to the ear and angular and lacking some effects to make that music smoother. But I don't know why you would want to subject yourself to 30 minutes of the same 60 to 80 second song on a loop over and over again to become hypnotically aligned with it. It just felt like an odd premise for me. So I've kept this on my wish list just out of pure morbid curiosity, but I don't think I'd be picking this up unless it was on a deep sale. The last 2 games on this list are games that I won't be picking up and I've not wishlisted, but they could still be good games for you, so I've included them anyway. The first one is Encounters Music Stories, and this sees you play as 2 musical instruments joining together in a song, and you have to trigger the notes for each of those 2 musicians or musical instruments constantly throughout the song. The problem that I found with this is that the visuals didn't match the audio, and the game basically says, pay no attention to the visuals, think about how fluid the audio is. But the audio doesn't seem to play in a fluid way, or the things that you're triggering don't seem to match the audio. It just felt really clunky and disconnected to me. And whilst I appreciated that it felt like a good idea, I think the execution was too rough around the edges for me to feel engaged in this process. And I found it extraordinarily frustrating and kind of gave up after about 15 minutes of trying. The second game on this list that I'm not taking forward is DJ Clicker World Tour. This was kind of marketed as a clicker rhythm game. There is no rhythm to this whatsoever. It is just purely a clicker game where lights go around the screen to electronic music. Yeah, you can turn up and down the tempo and you can put on some minor little effects here and there, but it's not a rhythm game in any way, shape or form, and I don't really gel well with clicker games, so it did nothing for me. However, if you like clicker games and you like club and techno music, maybe this might still scratch an itch for you. And that is my rhythm action list. I hope that was interesting and informative. Let me know if you've wishlisted anything below. I found some gems that I'll definitely be picking up and reviewing later on in the channel when they come out.
Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane-network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.